Rick Franzosa, welcome.
Thank
Rick
you.
is one of the most respected voices in smart manufacturing and digital transformation. With his extensive experience, including a notable tenure at Gartner, Rick brings a unique perspective on the evolving role of MES systems, the impact of AI, and what it truly takes for industrial organizations to stay ahead in a fast-changing world. So today we have the pleasure of speaking with him about the real challenges facing manufacturer, the key to successful MES implementation, and how emerging technologies are reshaping the shop floor. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you, David. Great to be here.
Great. Can you start giving us a little bit of your background and how you ended up in this world of MES?
I started on my career as a design and test engineer at an aerospace and defense firm in Connecticut. Well, it's no secret, Pratt& Whitney Aircraft. And after spending a half dozen or so years there, I had gotten the computer programming bug early on, and I was able to transfer to another division of what at the time was United Technologies and became a software programmer working on computer-aided process planning applications for the manufacturing floor. And having also done, some co-op jobs and things like that in manufacturing, I had already developed a real enjoyment for it. And just to move forward, the remainder of my career moving to when I got to Gartner was working after I left UTC, working for a number of software companies in areas like PLM, MES, computer-aided process planning, et cetera. For pretty much from about 1985 to when I started Gartner in 2014. So, that was where I got, my background, always involved in manufacturing, mostly complex discrete manufacturing, and then moved into Gartner to take over a role of supporting and advising Gartner clients on MES, MOM related technologies, and did that until till a year and a half ago when I retired, and then decided to unretire in May, and I'm now with Tech Clarity, which is another research firm that covers both PLM and manufacturing.
Talking about the past, can you tell us a little bit like things you were expecting to happen or prediction that you had like 10 years ago when you were starting at Gartner and that turned out completely differently of what you expected?
Oh, well, that one is easy. And that was, MES will never run in the cloud. So in 2014, you really almost couldn't get people to talk about it. And certainly there were some vendors at the time, especially on the ERP side, that offered both cloud and on-premise. But it was pretty much a given that cloud computing could not support the speed and availability requirements of MES systems. That was the theme in 2014.
And do you think we're there right now?
We're close. What I
Close.
will say is certainly, for the first time, I'm seeing that most vendors in this space are leading with cloud as opposed to offering it as an option if it's something you really wanted.
Mm,
So I think, really kind of on the backs of the hyperscalers, Microsoft and AWS and everyone else in that space. The platforms have become more reliable and more secure and more
mhm.
available. So it really then comes down to, where's your plant located, and
Yeah.
then the last mile problem. But I think in general, um, it's becoming more of a standard.
Yeah, agree. And um, talked about 10 years ago. What about 10 years in the future? Do you have prediction about 2035? What would be different from now? What do you expect? So that we can look
2035,
at
be able
back in 10 years and say, all right, was Rick right?
Oh, good. That this is great. I used to work with a gentleman, and that was his claim to fame. He said his job was predicting, you know, and he said he didn't have to be right or wrong because by the time
Yeah.
the year came around, he'd probably be doing something else. So, um, but that's an interesting question because I think there are some things that the expectation has been for decades that, oh, this problem is huge and how are we ever going to solve it? What I can tell you is, from my personal experience, um, when I started as a design and test engineer in 1974, the biggest topic of conversation is what are we going to do when all these old guys retire? So we all made it work, and we all continue to make it work. And so a lot of the conversation on, oh my gosh, what's going to happen when we lose all this knowledge? Um,
Mm,
I really think um, it's in some ways a little bit overblown. It's always been that way. There
mm,
was always been that set of people who are going to retire and take a lot of their knowledge with them. I think what's different now is we've got better ways of capturing it, and
yeah.
everything from the admittedly imperfect large language models, but also even things like being able to capture video and turn it into instructions and those sorts of things. So I think that um, you know, where we'll be in 2035 is I think that will no longer be an issue. Is
Mm,
that sort of capturing tribal knowledge is something that we will have achieved. um, I don't believe that there'll be no humans in plants and in factories anymore, uh, or no humans working in offices anymore. I think that's not going to happen. But I think that advances in technology will make knowledge capture and knowledge sharing continually more easy to do.
mm. All right, let's walk back now to what's the current situation and the current challenge. So first, uh, in the industrial environment, it's constantly changing and evolving, right? What do you think companies should prioritize today in their strategic
That's
plan?
a great question. Especially when you can't walk a minute. You can't look at the screen for a minute. You can't do anything without being bombarded with artificial intelligence and, you know, both the good and bad of that. And I've
Yeah.
always felt just the fact that the first word is artificial and we're all excited about it, just, that I think that's hysterical. But I think really the focus now, because these technologies are coming online, the focus more than ever has to be on people. um, I'm fond of saying, and I didn't invent this, but I'm fond of saying people, process, data, technology in that order, and that before you start doing any sort of large scale AI work, you really have to make sure that you have all of those things aligned,
Mm,
because in general, people are going to be suspicious of AI, and why is that? Well, first of all, because it does have a good side and a bad side, and but most importantly is it's so new and different that people don't have any idea how their jobs might be affected
mm,
when AI comes online, and when your livelihood and your freedom and your autonomy are challenged. That tends to be a gut reaction,
yeah.
and something where you're definitely going to fight back.
Mm,
There's a survey that we did at Tech Clarity, and we'll see the slide in a second. But it was called "Making Manufacturing and Analytics and AI Matter." It was published this year by my colleague Julie Fraser, and one of the questions that was asked is, "What are the biggest hurdles for generative AI?" And number two on the list was cultural resistance and lack of trust.
mm,
The only thing that was a bigger Gen AI hurdle was lack of data to train the model. And so you look at it that way, people process data technology. People are trying to do technology first when they don't have when they don't have the trust of their people
yeah.
and they don't have data. Um, that's a recipe for failure.
And based on your experience, what has been like the evolution of the perception of MES over that time from those same people? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
do you think
I
it's
really
becoming a strategic lever?
I I really enjoy this question because by the time I got to Gartner, people were starting. MES was getting a really bad reputation. I remember um, a vendor that we used to partner with going into AMR Research, which is now the supply chain group within Gartner, and tell a customer, um, having an analyst tell a customer, um, MES, that's a black hole of integration. It's like, really? That's what you're going to lead with? And then, of course, things happen like industrial IoT is invented. And, this
Yeah.
is a headline 2019 Automation World magazine put on the screen. MES is dead. IIoT has arrived. Move ahead to 2022. A company called Machine Metrics does a blog, The Death of MES and the Rise of the Connected Factory.
Yeah.
And so this has gone on and on and on. And all that happens is people still go out and buy MES systems. And
Yeah.
the reason is there's a job to be done, you know?
Mm,
And what when people would say this to me, do you think MES is dying? Do you think MES is not relevant anymore? And what I would say, MES is a three-letter acronym. It stands for Manufacturing Execution Systems. The stuff that MES systems do today has to be done. Somebody or some technology or some system has to do it.
yeah.
And so what you have now are systems called MES, and they provide that function. Um, does industrial IoT provide the function? Not by itself. No.
Yeah.
Does AI provide the function? Not by itself. No.
Mm.
So regardless of all of the things that are happening around what we call MES, um, it's a unique thing.
What do you think are the most common mistakes that companies does when they do an MES implementation and project? Do you think it
Well,
stems
yep,
more from technology, from organizational readiness? What is?
it's people. This is where the other slide should come up. Um, I start with a quote, and this is attributed to a woman named Linda Hill, who was a digital transformation expert at the Harvard Business School. And it's not a direct quote. It was a quote of a quote. So I got to be really careful about it. But it says the hardest thing about digital transformation, never the technology, always the people.
Hmm.
And we've talked about that earlier. And I think the issue really becomes what's important. And so this is taking this not just from MES, but just the whole idea of digital transformation. Um, she did 1,500 surveys, 200 workshops, and when she and her team asked leaders what are the most important things for digital transportation, these are the top five in order. First one was You need adaptability, curiosity, creativity, comfort with ambiguity. I love that one. And then last, digital literacy. So
Mm,
I think when you start up and your idea is we need new technology, you're looking at the end. You're not looking at the beginning. People are looking for a technology because they assume the technology is the answer. No, the answer is providing data so that your people can make better decisions, more informed decisions, improve their own competency, which then allows them to do things like continuous improvement.
mm,
And in continuous improvement projects, what's the first thing you look for? Well, what's the data that's going to tell me that we're actually improving? And what's the data that's going to tell us what's wrong? And so industrial IoT is a perfect example. Um, Industrial IoT systems came on like gangbusters. Um, they don't do MES, and it's really
yeah,
interesting. The MES is dead because we have industrial IoT. What industrial IoT platforms did is they allowed you to collect more and more and more and more information very inexpensively. And what do you do with that? You dump it in a data lake.
yeah.
Um, Great quote. I say, let's collect everything, sort it out later. So you dump it in a data lake and then you analyze it and you look for anomalies and you look for trends. And those anomalies and trends, in most use cases for industrial IoT, those anomalies and trends tell you this machine or this line is going to need maintenance in the next 2 weeks because the last time we saw this happen, the machine broke down. I'm not saying that that is not valuable. It's extremely valuable. But that's what we began to learn. So what I think the value of what IoT brought to the table is look at how much data we can get. Now, what else can we do with that data? How can we improve our products? How can we improve quality? How can we improve the knowledge and competency of our frontline workers now
Mm.
that we have all this data? So I think, whether we're talking about industrial IoT or AI, I think that's the idea behind it. But it still starts with the people.
What do you think that other than the people, like what should people or companies be asking themselves like before they do? Like what are their blind spots? Um,
Yeah,
what's what's they should be asking right during the decision process?
yeah. That I think. I mean, there's some obvious ones, especially if some vendors coming in saying, "Hey, I can do all of these things for you. Um, let's get started." You know, just hand over the check. Obviously, who else have you done it for? Can we talk to them? Um, a question that I actually, in my Gartner time, I collected questions that customers would ask vendors. And I basically put that out in a research note. And one of my favorite ones was tell us about a project that failed and why it failed and how you fixed it. And, they would get no answer from vendors on that. And they said, no, 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 we need to know this because every project has a problem. Every single project with a complex piece of software is going to run into problems. We don't want you to tell us we never run into problems. We want you to tell us how you fix them.
Hmm.
And I think that's one question for sure. Um, and and then you ask the same thing internally. Um, we spend all this money. What are we going to get for that? What is the improvement we're going to see? It's 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 amazing to me the number of times when we would ask uh, our Gartner clients, so did you benchmark before you started this project? And so what do you mean? Did you actually measure how you're doing? Did you actually determine where your biggest problems were? And you're trying to get people to kind of unthink and unlearn, to to look at this thing as an opportunity to make their lives better because if they don't, and worse than that, if you don't ask them, um, what's the old saying? If you always get what you always got, if you always well, let me do the one I know. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect a different answer, that's insanity.
Yeah.
That you have to you have to be able to, get to that point where and what I find in real life is you go talk to people on the plant floor and they're really smart because they're the ones that have no choice. If
Yeah.
something goes wrong, they have to fix it. They have
They
to
have to
find a way.
live with it.
Yeah, and they have to live with it. So if you tell them what would you like different about this, they'll be more than happy to tell you.
Yeah.
One of the benefits of being a Gartner analyst is that you're trusted. And don't do not get me wrong, because I worked for software companies a lot longer than I worked for Gartner, but people don't trust software companies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that that's why it's also good to say, look, don't talk to me. Talk to this guy
Yeah.
at Jable who uses our system, or at wherever else. Talk to them. They'll tell you what they did, and they'll tell you about their journey and why this is so important to them.
Yeah.
And I think that that really speaks volumes. That's better than the demo. You know, um, there's nothing better um, than having customers that are willing to do that.
Do you have an example or an anecdote of a project that the implementation failed?
I think every example, it comes down to uh, communication, engagement level, having all stakeholders involved all the way through. And that's a nightmare to organize and it's disruptive. But
Hmm.
if you don't do that, if the first time a guy walks into the plant and has to use the MES, if the first time he does it, he's never seen it before, it's the first day it's in production. Um, that's a real problem. That's a
Hmm.
real problem. If they haven't had a chance to sit down in a conference room and play, just play with it.
Yeah.
Um, you know, because there's this thing called user acceptance testing
Yeah.
that is always listed as the last thing at the end of the project. And I always think about how ludicrous that is.
Yeah.
Is that not that you shouldn't be doing it, but that you wait till the pressure is built, and probably the project is 6 months late already.
Yeah.
And now you're going to give the users a week maybe to go through this thing,
Yeah.
with the whole thing riding on them. No, they have to be involved every step of the way, and their voices have to be heard every step of the way.
Yeah.
And and that's that's the key.
I would like to ask you a few questions about AI before we
Okay,
finish, because it's a hot topic right now, right?
because you can't avoid it, right?
Yeah. And I know that before you've been cautioning people about AI being overhyped, especially in MES. But what do you think are the main reasonable and credible use cases for AI in MES? Um, well, now or within the next 2 or 3 years.
Sure, sure. Obviously, I've attended a lot of events where AI is being discussed, and I've seen a lot of YouTube time, a lot of uh, research papers, and this and that. And there are things that AI can do that
Hmm.
humans can't possibly do. And the number one thing you want to do when you go to adopt AI as part of this process is to identify those things. Um, like somebody said, what is AI good at? Reviewing, 1 million X-rays in the blink of an eye. What are humans really bad at? Reviewing
Hmm.
1 million X-rays. So So it's that combination of what is AI good at that humans are not good at.
Hmm.
And those are the things to focus on. So what we've seen in pretty much every vendor, every MES vendor is doing something. Um, what we've seen that is at least partially ready for prime time are like the chatbot sort of functionalities of,
Hmm.
asking a question, gee, I've just run into this issue, or tell me the best way to do X. And if you've got the data, and you've built a large language model and you've tested it successfully, then you're going to have situations where somebody can actually do that. Um, what would you do before? Well, you talk to the guy who's been there the longest and has probably seen everything, or you go to your foreman, or you go to whoever. But you'll be able to say, look, I just ran into this issue.
Hmm.
What's the best way to do this? And it will say, well, here's three possibilities. The first one, from the data we have, the first one is the most logical, or probably the preferred one, but probably any of these three would work. And then it's your job as the operator, as the human, to then say, okay, I think that will work. I'm going to do that. One of the other answers could be none of those things are going to work. you know, and you have to maintain the control. It says, that's just not going to work. And so I think that's state of the market right now. Um, an area where we've seen some really incredible things is in vision systems. Um, I saw it was a videotape of a videotape. I'm dating myself. It was a streaming video of a company that was, they were looking for a way to sort out bad kernels of wheat. And so
Hmm.
basically, they would have the wheat fall down through this air curtain, and they had a camera in front of it, and the system would respond fast enough that if it saw like a discolored grain of wheat, it would shoot out a blast of air and knock it out of the stream. You know, you
Wow.
can't do that any other way. I remember even 15 years ago where I think it was Orida or one of the potato companies where if a tater tot got burnt, it was a little dark that the vision system would pick it up, and either knock it off the line or have a little arm that would knock it off the line or whatever. And so, a lot of this has been around for a while, but it's gotten better and better and better and faster and faster. So I think it's extremely powerful. It's also flawed. And I think that again, it's what can it do to help people do a better job?
Yeah.
Not replace people because it can't replace people. It can replace some tasks. I mean, it's the same as MES, right? If you had a person in your company whose sole job was to take paperwork instructions, run them through a copy machine, collate them, staple them, and walk them down to the plant floor, and that's the only thing they did, that person loses their job. But
Yeah.
that's not creativity,
Yes.
right? So I think that's the thing. One of the I listened to somebody talking about their use of agentic AI, and he was very very impassioned about it, and he said, "So now all I need are visionaries. I don't need people to collate paper and staple it, right? I don't need people to walk something from point A to point B. I need people to come up with ideas and think and I mean, if that was your job, wouldn't you rather be
Yeah.
coming up with ideas and thinking and discussing them? Sure, you would. I mean, that's so I don't think there's a need to fear. I think the only reason to fear AI is if you're really comfortable doing mindless work.
Yeah. What do you think? Like, what's going to happen with AI and MES in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you think there'll be significant change, structural shift that will change the way MES is working at the moment?
You know what? I think so. But I think in general, what an MES is designed for, that work will still be done. It's the way that it does it that's going to be different. And I think that's a combination of things. But I think there are some additional skills that need to be out there. I mean, the you know when we look at what do people uh, focus on who are actually adopting AI. Um, and there's a slide for this. Um, we did a survey called Manufacturing in the Age of AI, and this was done in 2023. And when we ask, oh, what are the things that are most important in Industry 4.0 and in advancing your technology and advancing manufacturing, there was pretty much agreement straight across the board on what was important. But then when we sorted that information between top performers and everybody else, there are two things that the top performers focused on that others did not focus on to the same extent. And those were consistent management of all plant data and integration of equipment, plant, and enterprise data. So
Mm,
that is going to become the most important thing is how do you manage, how do you find the data, collect the data, manage the data, structure the data. That is going to be the key skill that, quite frankly, not a lot of people have. And I think because AI, the strength and the accuracy and the believability of what you get from a generative AI system is the only thing it can be based on is the data.
mm,
If you don't have if you don't have data that you can believe in, you're not going to get results you can believe in. And so other than that, MES is still doing what it's doing, right? It's
yeah.
collecting manufacturing information. It's moving work from station to station. It's sending information on work order status, inventory consumed, labor hours charged, et cetera, back up to keep ERP happy. Um, you know, basically, the like I said, it doesn't matter what the three-letter acronym is. It doesn't matter whether you're
Yeah.
doing it on paper or spreadsheets or and actually MES stands for multiple Excel spreadsheets. It doesn't matter. The job has to be done, and um, you'll get better at doing it. There'll be more efficient ways of doing it. A lot of that's going to come from AI. A lot of that's going to come from just more data availability. And a lot of that's going to come from just an improvement in the tools in general.
Mm,
But I think, certainly 5 years down the road, AI will be having a huge impact on it. Um, there was a hype cycle that Gartner put out on
yeah.
AI, and it's the typical thing about stuff starts as a trigger, and then it goes to this peak of inflated expectations and down to the trough of disillusionment and then out to where it's productive. Um, AI stuff is all either at the top of the peak or sliding down into the trough right now. Um, but regardless of that, the other thing that a hype cycle predicts is how long is it going to take. Pretty much all of the stuff that we're talking about in AI is being predicted to be production ready in 2 to 5 years. So,
Mm,
it is moving that fast. I think there's going to be bumps in the road. Um, I think that, maybe even at a fundamental level, there are some major things that might change, but I think it's unstoppable. And I do think you said 5 years. I think in 5 years, things will look very differently. And so, from the perspective of the end user, learn about your data, find your
mm,
data, contextualize your data, data cleansing, master data management, all that stuff that nobody wants to think about. I like to compare it to telling a kid they have to eat their vegetables, right? It's just, but you have to do it.
Well, Rick, thank you so much for sharing your time, your insight, your experience with us. Your perspective really clarifies the landscape for us and everybody listening. And good luck again on the future and what you're doing at the Clarity and your retirement.
Well, thank you very much, David. It's been a real pleasure.
Looking forward to speaking with you again.